The Millers were an unremarkable, traditionally speaking, average family. They met, fell in love, got married. It's as old as time's story. Tom's mom and dad, both engineers, warmly welcomed Audrey, who was brought up in an orphanage. However, the parents were in no hurry to help the young people financially, giving them a chance to make their own way. Audrey's foster parents fully supported this idea and looked at how their children cope with life's difficulties. The young people worked for a state-owned enterprise and lived paycheck to paycheck. Despite this, they were very friendly and never raised their voices. Therefore, relatives were very surprised when one day Tom reported that his wife was missing. The only detail of the incident was a phone call that Audrey had answered the night before. After that, she quickly packed up, told her husband she would be right back, and left. An hour or two went past. Then morning. But the woman still had not returned. Tom boned up his wife's phone, but the caller was unavailable. After calling all Audrey's friends and still no sign of her, Tom decided to go to the police. They promised to start searching, and all he could do is wait for the news. And soon the news came. A woman and a man were killed in a terrible accident when a car plunged into a deep ravine near the highway south of town. It was Audrey. The examination determined that the accident occurred on the same day when she disappeared. Tom had no idea where his wife was going. The case was classified as an accident and dismissed with haste. The man buried his wife and fell into a deep depression. The next 6 months seemed nothing but a strange dream to Tom. Nothing had changed. Same job, same house. However, he did not want to go inside anymore. Audrey was not there. Botchel rats at work began to make some plans for the devastated widower, but he didn't seem to notice their signs of attention and blatant flirting. All Tom's thoughts were about his dead wife. What could have happened on the eve of a sudden escape? Did Audrey go to another man? And if not, what secret had taken his beloved away? Another evening, trying to find the answer to such questions, Tom sat in front of the TV, automatically flipping through the channels. Stopped at the news program, he tried to focus on the events being discussed, but his thoughts were far, far away. The trill of the doorbell threw Tom off the thoughtfulness. What's the cat dragged in so late? He thought, and went to open the door reluctantly. Habitually, without looking through a peephole, the man quickly opened the door. For a few seconds, he stood perplexed, and then began to slide down on the floor. Tom, my dear Tommy. Familiar and such a dear voice returned Tom from oblivion. No, he was not imagining it. Audrey sat beside him, squatting, and rubbed her temples with a wet napkin. Get up, honey. It's really me. There's no mystery here. I'm alive. The woman dragged him up, trying to pull him to his feet. He still could not believe in what had happened, staring at her in shock and sitting on the floor. Then, with difficulty, Tom got up and limped towards the kitchen, holding his wife's hand tightly. It can't be real, because I went to the identification of the body myself. I buried you myself. Yes, everything that you saw was not a dream. The only thing is, who you buried was not me. Audrey gently ran her hand over her husband's unshaven cheek. Oh, you let yourself go so badly. Why would you do such? Tom caught his wife's hand and held on tightly to his lips. I just don't understand, but I'm very, very happy, the man said, holding on her hand to his cheek again, as if afraid to let go. You'll understand now. I'll tell you. Audrey freed her hand and looked into the teapot. When the fragrant tea was on the table, Audrey seated her husband, who was still unconscious, on a soft poof and sank into the opposite chair. This is a very old and complicated story. As you know, I was raised in an orphanage. I got there old enough to remember that I had a father, mother, and sister Martha. My sister and I are twins, and we have suffered greatly because of the separation. After my marriage, my pain was dulled. However, Martha never stopped looking for me, and last year I got a call at work. Remember, I went on a short business trip to the head office of our factory in the district center. It was there that she saw me from the cafe, was struck by the resemblance, but did not have time to approach. I was already getting into the car. The next day, she showed up at the office, and everyone had mistaken her for me. When she realized that she was right about our bloodline, she tricked my colleagues and found out everything about me. I was home by this time, and she was on my trail. Martha came to our city and phoned me. We met and were talking all working day. We were reminiscing, looking at the pictures of our loved ones on our phones. I was crying, not understanding why I was in an orphanage. Martha said that recently, after much questioning, the parents explained that they were forced to do so because of the difficult financial situation. In addition, my grandfather was very ill at that time, and my grandmother was lying close to death. Martha herself had just recovered from severe pneumonia and was very weak. My biological parents were not going to leave me in the orphanage forever, but when everything was settled, I was already given to the family, and the secrecy of adoption was not revealed. Martha also mentioned that she was happy in a marriage with an extremely wealthy man. Her husband loves her very much and literally bathes her in expensive gifts. My sister urged me to go to my parents, but I still refused, citing my loan label. After all, it was necessary to prepare everyone for this turn of events. That night she phoned me to say she was leaving. I just ran to see her off. Martha drove up in a taxi. We briefly said goodbye. I kissed her on the cheek, said that I would wait for her next time. She gave me the address, and a shiver went down my spine. It turns out that my parents' house is very close in the suburbs. How could we live so many years literally side by side and not meet? On impulse, I plopped into the back seat. Martha laughed and gave me a thumbs up. We spent the entire trip chatting and rushing the driver. I don't remember the time of the accident, and I don't know how long I was unconscious. But when I woke up, I saw that my sister was dead. I got out of the car, and for a long time I was thinking what to do. I wanted to see my birth parents, to look them in the eyes. How could I come without Martha? I don't know what happened. It must have been a slight blur of consciousness. But I decided, at least for a short time, to become Martha. I went back to the car and pulled out my sister's passport. Then I caught a ride and drove to the address of my parents. As I drove up to the house, I suddenly found myself starting to remember this place. Without much difficulty, I ordered Will to stop the car, and holding my worry, ran into the courtyard. I tried so hard to cope with my emotions, because from this moment on, I was going to become Martha. Although we can't tell the difference in appearance, our characters are completely different. Now I was going to be an impetuous giggler. I tried to cope with this role. At a family dinner, I easily communicated with my parents and kept watching them surreptitiously. They had no idea that Martha was looking for me all her life. And all of a sudden, one person I was afraid to see finally came. My sister's husband, Sam. Now mine. The first thing he did was a gentle kiss. And that's when I realized I was in real trouble. Tom, who had been listening with trepidation and interest, suddenly tensed and drummed on the table with his knuckles. Audrey put her hand gently on his arm. "You must know the truth, my love. After all, our future life depends on it. I will try to tell you without too much detail." Tom lowered his head and nodded. I played the role of the wife of a complete stranger for almost 6 months. Perhaps I was on a roll, or probably I was afraid of being discovered. All in all, I was doing pretty well. Now I know what it's like to live in luxury, to live high life. I know many of the most beautiful places on the beaches of Spain, and the best time to shop in Milan. I know what to order for breakfast in Paris, and what to wear to a fashion show in Moscow. But I also know what it's like to cry my eyes out because I had to go to bed with someone I don't love. I was waking up in the morning and was imagining a completely different man next to me. I could not bear it. So I began to plan my escape. You see, it was necessary that they didn't look for me. The opportunity came 2 days ago. Sam went abroad on business. I stopped next to my parents' house to take a last look at Mom and Dad. I took a towel and a rug and said I was going to the river. I put everything in the shade under a birch tree and left my beach bag there. I left my light flip-flops close to the water. I put on my sandals, picked up the things I had prepared, and ran towards the highway. The only mistake was my sunglasses, which I had to leave behind to avoid being recognized on the road. I arrived yesterday morning and spent the whole day in the hotel. Now I can't be myself again, but we must leave immediately. Will you forgive me, darling? Is there a chance? Dazed by what he heard, Tom could not utter a word. He was moving slowly around the kitchen, nervously tapping at his chin. He stopped behind his wife and put his arm around her shoulders. The widower in the past buried his nose in the wife's hair, inhaling the dear smell, and suddenly felt a rush of unconscious happiness that Audrey is alive. What a mess you've made, girl. I didn't know I was living with such an adventurer. That's it. No more shenanigans. Tomorrow we will go to your parents. It's time to put everything in its place.